Hi, our guest today is Meghan Hornberger, one of the candidates running for one of the 3 seats of the school committee in the April 3rd Milford Town election. Welcome, Meghan.
Thanks for having me, Kevin.
It's a long-winded introduction. I should say my co-host, Al Holman, is not here today. So I'll ask you the same question we ask every one of the 7 candidates.
Sure.
Why are you running for school committee?
Absolutely. In part, for me, Kevin, it was why not? You know, it's something I've actually contemplated for a few years now, and I think my children are at the age where I have capacity to give back in a way and in a forum that's really important to me. I'm a very hard worker, an active listener, and an effective collaborator, and I've also sort of rejigged my my corporate life to kind of allow additional bandwidth, and so now I have the capacity for it, and so that's why I threw my name in this year.
Okay. Since you mentioned children, are they in the school system?
So one is currently, he'll be headed to Stacy Middle School next year. One will be joining in the fall at Memorial Elementary, and one will be home for another couple of years.
Okay. So we always ask if people have
Certainly. Absolutely. I will just add to that. I do not believe that that's what qualifies me to be a school committee member. Hopefully it will show people that I am certainly invested in the school system, but being a mom in and of itself does not make me a school committee candidate.
Okay, and what do you do for a living?
So I have my CPA in Massachusetts. I'm a certified public accountant, and most of my time has been spent in the internal audit function, so corporate compliance, enterprise risk management. Right now I'm doing accounting and finance consulting for a renewable energy company based in Boston.
Okay, so you must have loved it what I told you prior to the show. I spent the day in a statistics class.
Absolutely.
For assessors, yeah.
Warms my heart.
Thank God for Excel is all I can say.
No doubt.
So what the other question we've asked every candidate, quite simply, is: do you have any specific goals in mind if you get elected? Are there certain things you'd like to pursue?
Yeah, I think for me, Kevin, honestly, it really comes down to accountability. I'm really interested in continuing the work the district's doing around their strategic measures of performance, and also on the long-range planning. You know, how can we enhance that and build upon that, certainly to include some capital investments that we'll be doing over the next few years, but just overall planning for the district. I think I don't come in with my own personal agenda in terms of I'd like to see these 3 programs, for example, added. I think fundamentally, I look to the administration and to the teachers in terms of what their top priorities are and how to assist with those.
Right, and of course, since one of the 3 roles school committee play by state law, hire and fire the superintendent and policy, the third one is budget. Could I assume with your background you'd be interested in playing a big role on the budget?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's a big number. It's incredibly important, and I think that really is where you're able to help dictate a lot of where the schools and children are spending their time. So I would definitely like to dig into that.
Now, there's been some talk about the various levels the Milford Public Schools are or have not achieved or dropped from.
Sure.
The high school dropping from a 1 to a 3. Do you believe that both the administration and the school committee should be held accountable for things like that?
I do. I think that, you know, obviously testing is one measure of how you assess a school's performance. I would add to that, I don't think it's the only measure. I'm probably still in question as to whether I think it's the most important measure, but certainly it is a measure. And so we need to be ensuring that our children are good.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, you know, I have 3 kids in their 20s. Not everybody tests well. There are a segment of people who just know the topic but don't test well.
Certainly, and I would argue, you know, if you look at someone out, you know, 5 or 10 years out of school, probably their test scores are fairly irrelevant to the level of success they've had in life.
I would agree, but then what happens is MCAS scores come out and everybody goes, well, you're either lower or higher than X school next door.
And I think of him because that is sort of the chosen measure of evaluation. That is why we need to care and why we need to work to improve them.
But I always like to put it in perspective. While we talk about one school system in Massachusetts having higher scores than another, if you look at the country as a whole, all 50 states, Massachusetts is still #1
Absolutely.
in scoring,
Absolutely.
which is staggering to think of that we're the highest level of 50 states, and we're arguing over where we rank in that highest level.
Certainly.
So people tend to forget that in the debate over school scores. So I like to bring that out every so often because it's very interesting. You know, unlike Texas, where I read this about 2 years ago, the Texas legislature voted that schools should never teach, oh no, I'm going to forget the words, critical thinking. That was actually a law passed in Texas.
Okay.
I don't think they knew what it meant. But I think critical thinking is enormously important in today's society.
Certainly in life it is.
You know, and it is taught in school systems in the state. So.
Wow, that's interesting.
Okay. So I'm just curious. You know, you said you've been interested in this for a couple of years. Did you just wake up one day and said, "Yeah, school committee"? Is it you knew people on it? You watched what
Sure.
they did and didn't like it.
Yeah.
You watched what they did and did like it.
Yeah, certainly. So my son has been in the school system now for 6 years,
Yeah.
and so I've been active throughout that time, volunteering in the classroom, going on field trips. You know, I was a co-president of the PTO at Memorial for a few years. I was on both the Memorial Elementary and currently on the Woodland Elementary Schools Council. So I've been
Okay.
active in the schools
Right.
for a few years, seen the school improvement plans, been able to been involved in the development of those, and so I've always been interested, and I've sort of would like to think I've always been involved. So I think it was more this year. There's 3 open seats.
Hey, there's 3 open seats. It's a lot easier to get in.
Well,
candidly.
no, actually, that I understood. But for me, it was more there's 3 open seats, and I actually think I have a very strong skill set to offer. And shame on me if I don't stand up and put my hand up.
Yeah. Well, first, I have to say this too. Congratulations for running, because most people sit at home and complain, but don't. Second of all, if you're really interested, to me the mark is most people run once and they disappear if they lose. Run again.
Fair.
That's my own personal advice.
Absolutely.
Run again, because it shows people that you really want to get on the committee or board.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting process. You know, I didn't obviously didn't know what I was getting into fully.
Never did bake sales or anything before.
Yeah, and it's just been really great to engage with so many members of our community that you wouldn't be doing on a regular basis.
What have you learned from talking to people? Are there hot issues that the public has about the school system?
I think fundamentally everyone is interested in improving our perception, because I think at the end of the day, Kevin, there's a lot of fantastic things going on in our schools, and we're trying to kind of show those to the world so that we're getting the credit I think that the school system deserves.
What's the misperception you're hearing from people?
I think the level 3 really drags us down, and I think because of the unique population that Milford has, that in some ways is obviously completely correlated to our scores. And so if you have a large population of students who don't speak the language and they're asked to take this test, chances are they're probably not going to do well on this test in their first couple years in the system, right? So if you have a high schooler that's brand new to the country.
Yeah, I'd like to see then Milford compared to other cities and towns with the same population.
Absolutely, absolutely. You can actually do that on the Mass Department of Ed's website. They actually have some pretty.
Oh, I
Yeah,
know you can,
okay,
but
sorry.
the general public may not know this.
Oh,
that-
absolutely.
that maybe a fairer comparison is not to say Milford versus Hopedale, Minden, Upton, Holliston, Bellingham, Franklin, you know, pick whatever towns you want to compare it to, but to say Framingham. I hate to say Brockton because it's so much bigger, and Framingham's so much bigger, but similar diverse populations.
Marlborough, Barnstable, and that's
Marlborough
exactly
is a
right.
good one.
We do look to neighboring towns,
Yes.
which I understand due to proximity.
Well, because if people choice out, they tend to go to
Something close.
I understand Holliston seems to be the favorite one lately. Well, because it's nearby. And
Sure. Yep, absolutely. But to me, the appropriate comparison is districts that are similar to you in terms of characteristics. So that's absolutely right. And
Right, the same way when you look at Milford, it doesn't make sense to measure Mendon and Upton and Hopkinton against Milford. It makes sense to measure Milford against more of a Marlborough, even a Westboro, things with similar commercial areas, you know, population size and things like that.
Sure.
So have you looked at how Milford stacks up with those comparison towns?
Yeah, and I think first, before I answer that, maybe the one interesting thing to me is if you do compare us to neighboring towns in terms of our offerings, I actually think
Yeah, far more.
absolutely. So it's interesting.
Name me another school with a pool.
Absolutely. 19 AP classes, all these kids taking foreign languages. I mean, there's just a breadth of offerings in terms of athletics, the music, the arts.
You know, more home to Milford TV, the whole video program.
Absolutely, exactly. That's a
I
great
have yet
example.
to see a high school with something like that.
Absolutely. Hospitality, the banking program. So I think it's interesting that unfortunately, the test scores can't necessarily stack up against those districts if 90% of your, 96% of your kids are English.
The entire education hierarchy will shoot me, but I'm going to say what I tell my children is, by the time you're 25 or 26 and you're moving on to your second job, nobody cares. Nobody cares. Nobody actually cares if you made the National Honor Society in high school when you're 30.
In college even, right, to some extent, whether you went to this school or that school, paid 30
So
grand or 90.
Don't shoot me, it's actually reality. And I try to tell kids who are, graduating, when you graduate college and you get your first job, it's did you go to college? Oh, where and what did you study? Because people want to know, A, it's a checklist item today, and B, did you study anything relevant to the job you're applying for?
Absolutely.
So 18 months, 2 years later, you leave, you go to another job, it's a given you went to college or, you went to college, yeah, they know from your resume, but it's more, what can you bring to me that you learned at your last job?
Absolutely.
And if you go to a third and fourth job, it's sort of not even brought up.
And in conjunction with that,
However, kids, it is extremely important. Please go to school, get your diploma. I don't want to get shot.
In conjunction with that, I think that today's employers are also looking for some very fundamental skills that we need to be teaching in terms of communication and personal finance and civics that I would love to see explored more.
Bob Tremblay, the former superintendent, told me one day that when he's got somebody at the elementary level, he's educating for jobs that don't exist yet. But I mean, I look at the critical things in society today. It's definitely, knowing the Microsoft Office suite. We were joking about Excel before me, but I mean, Excel, Word, PowerPoint, all
Absolutely.
that. Critical thinking. Hopefully, the ability to write, and not in text speak, but to write sentences.
Certainly.
And to have a good work ethic.
Absolutely.
That seems to be the knock, although I have 2 out of 3 of my children are so-called millennials. They have work ethic. And that's the joking knock against millennials. They don't, they do.
Absolutely.
But I mean, one of your opponents for the 3 seats talked about the fact, the youngest one talked about the fact that he wished high school taught how to negotiate college loans, or at least how to understand them. Because you're 18 and you're signing your life away. Because most people don't realize that once the student is 18, as a parent of a college student, I can tell you the tuition bill comes to the student and the grades go to the student, not to the person paying.
Absolutely. And how about credit even, right? I remember going to
credit cards.
They're at every walk on campus and everyone wants you to sign up. They're going to give you a free
12.
t-shirt. Absolutely.
Have 12. Have
Absolutely.
have $1,000 from each of 12 cards, and then they come running to mom and dad when they suddenly owe $6,000 and can't pay it.
Absolutely.
Yes, you actually have to pay those back.
Absolutely.
Especially if they're growing up with a debit card.
Certainly.
But I agree with those are fundamental life skills people need that unfortunately they're not getting anymore.
So I think to supplement those to any extent would be a huge asset to our kids as they leave the system.
What else do you see?
I can remember my dad telling me, when I went out, I started my first job at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I had just finished graduate school, so I had some loans coming due, and he said, Meg, put as much as they'll match in your 401k. And I was like, I got to pay the rent, I got to pay these loans, but I did it, and you look back 25 years later, and that's a pretty great
Well, can
advice.
I tell you something? My oldest is 4 years out of college, and he's done the max in every savings plan allowed.
Excellent.
And he's sitting at age 28 on quite a nest egg already. And I tell him, do not ever, ever withdraw that.
Absolutely. That's
Not
exactly
for
right.
any reason. And, try to keep doing that as you, get married and have children and
Absolutely.
just keep doing that. You won't want retirement. That's something else people aren't taught.
Absolutely.
Well, my kids grew up hearing me ask the famous question, which is if you get a charge card, say $1,000 limit, and you charge up to the max and you only make the minimum payments, how many years does it take you to pay the card off? It's something like 26 years.
For an item that you're not going to even own in 26 years. I mean, it's unfortunate.
Yeah, but
it's
that
scary.
staggers the mind when they hear that, and then they go prove it.
Yep.
I say, well, wait till you get your first card and try it.
Absolutely.
Because the interest payments, 26%, 27%, just, you pay the minimum, and your next month's interest is almost what you paid.
Absolutely.
At any rate, what other thoughts do you have on the school system?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall we offer very strong programs, and we have a great administration and great teachers. I think we need to support them and provide them additional resources where we can. I think the work that we're doing in regards to social emotional learning, I think in part in terms of what we were just talking about, Kevin, is just so important in this day and age.
Could you better explain that?
Sure.
Another candidate brought that up, and I have to say, I know it's a current term,
Yep.
but what does it mean in terms of life
Sure.
skills?
Sure, absolutely. When I think about it in terms of educating the whole student. And so a good example that I think of is, in some cases, I'm pretty naive. I remember they do a program at Memorial Elementary called Books and Beyond. And so the concept is the kids have to read a certain number of pages. They move across this map. At the end, they get an award to encourage literacy. And one of the teachers had said to me once, well, Megan, some of the kids don't do it because they don't have books at home. And another teacher had said once, sometimes there's kids who are coming to school fairly anxious. They're not sure who's going to pick them up at the end of the day. There's factors, in today's society, these children are coming to school with issues that weigh so heavily. They would weigh heavily on an adult. Right. And it's hard to begin to teach you your multiplication facts.
If you don't know where you're getting a meal or going home and have no books.
Absolutely.
I will just remind the schools that there is this wonderful thing called the Milford Town Library.
Absolutely.
Right across the street from Stacy.
Absolutely. It's a great building, definitely. But I think it's really about educating the whole child and helping to address some of those issues such that we're evening out the playing field and that everyone will be able to come to the table ready to learn.
But doesn't that distract from the school system's core mission of just what we think of the old ABCs
Sure.
of educating, that teachers have enough to do today, and now people want them to become almost social service agencies on top of that.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that is the challenge. I absolutely agree. Teachers have more than enough on their plate already. But I think the challenge is these are the students that are coming to school, and so this is the population that we need to serve. And so it's about how best to prepare them.
And candidly, society has changed
Yeah.
a lot since I was in elementary to high school level.
Certainly. Was school safety something that you talked about when you went to school?
Only waiting for the bus because it was in Newark, New Jersey,
Okay.
after dark.
There you go.
School safety was not people coming in and shooting, it was people in the neighborhood robbing you.
Or maybe a fire drill.
Or fire drill. The people who had problems at home, it wasn't talked about back then. If somebody didn't have a dad or a mom, or they were poorer than somebody,
Sure.
it wasn't talked about.
Certainly.
Did I know there were people in school that had less than we had, my sisters and I? Yeah, but it was not, and we didn't have as many, we did have language problems, but not like today.
Absolutely.
Which, by the way, are not unique to Massachusetts. Just travel around the country and everybody's dealing with the same issues.
Well, to me, that's actually one of the interesting things is that if you think about Milford, I think it's fairly representative of the country as a whole. Again, I think it appears more unique because it's not like neighboring towns.
Well, you have it with the heroin debate. People go, oh, it's terrible, people using heroin in Milford. Okay, I've got a son in college in Kansas City, Missouri. The same problem exists there. The same problem exists in Raleigh, North Carolina, where my oldest lives. It's across the country. The ELL issue is across the country.
Absolutely.
It's not just Milford. And I think the perception problem is, oh, Milford has problems. Well, if that is, I call it more of an issue. Every school system in America is confronting the same issue. And it might not be a Hispanic language. It might be a Middle East language.
Sure.
It might be an African language. But we're a nation of immigrants, no more than or less than before.
Absolutely.
And it's just more pronounced today.
Absolutely. That's right. And so that's the population that we're trying to educate.
Right.
And so we're trying to find the best way to do that.
And the cultures are equally different.
Certainly.
But again, they're no different than before. I'm only a second generation German-American immigrant. My mother was the first person born here. Her parents were both natives of Germany who came over to escape certain dictators. So I view myself as much closer. On the Rudden side, we've been here I think I'm the 6th or 7th generation. But I never forget, I'm not really, on my mother's side, that far off the boat.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I evidently spoke German up until first grade,
Oh, wow.
I'm told. Well, my grandmother lived with us. My mother's mother lived with us, and
Oh,
I would read
excellent.
her the paper when she
Yeah.
couldn't read anymore in her 80s. They would have me read her the weekly German newspaper. And I looked at that today, and I said, the only German words I remember today are my mother swearing. So,
But that is why I think, contemplating bringing back foreign languages at an early age is so excellent, because you have the capacity to learn then, that I think it would be much harder for me to try to take that on.
and the other issue is, it is a global economy.
Yeah.
And anybody who's traveled outside of America knows most people in other countries speak their native language, speak English as a common business language, and typically might know one or two other languages, especially the Europeans. A typical European might know French, German, Spanish, and Italian.
I spent 4 years working for the Estee Lauder companies who were based in New York, and it was primarily an international role. And they would often peer us with our office in the Netherlands, and because the whole team spoke 3 to 4 languages, and you just often felt inadequate because it was really remarkable.
My
Fluent.
oldest son works for an insurance company in their high-tech division. He deals a lot with their Japanese partners, and he's been taking Japanese as an adult for 2 years, and he just went over there. It's a global economy, so
Absolutely.
whether it's Spanish, French, German, Chinese, whatever a school system can teach, it can only pay off during a work career.
Oh, absolutely. And the
It
dividends.
makes you more marketable to that company.
And the dividends that it pays is remarkable, because not only can you show respect for the culture, but you've gone the further step and you have the language skills.
And quite also, to be candid, and I don't know who's proven it, but everything I read says it's much easier for an elementary student and a high school student to learn a foreign language than an adult.
I believe that.
I believe it because I've been trying to take another language as an adult. I still remember my French from high school very, very well.
Excellent.
Maybe not enough to get the verb tenses, but I can do lots in it. But
Yeah.
to try and learn in the 50s another Romance language, very difficult.
Absolutely.
Whereas my kids got it in high school, one of them also did in college, and so that's not bad to do. What else would you like people to know about you in the school system?
Certainly. So I think I've shown sort of my dedication over the past 6 years in terms of having a commitment to the schools, and so I'd really like the opportunity to join that team of 7 and be a key team player in terms of moving the district's priorities forward.
Okay. Since you talked about the reputation of the school, I just wondered, are you aware there is a marketing subcommittee on the school committee that's trying to, starting to do things already, but I think they're just entering their second year of trying to change that perception?
Yeah, absolutely, Kevin.
What would you do to change the perception?
First off, I just have to say, kudos to the team, because I think they are working hard, and I think particularly on the social media presence, they're very active.
Well, candidly, the finance committee beat them up because they wanted the choice. If people don't realize, the town pays money to other districts when people choice out. The town also gains money when people choice in. Being candid, the finance committee beat up the school committee and said, you need to do something about this, when it tipped the more
Sure.
out than in.
Yeah, fair. So I think they're really trying to create
Yeah.
a presence and create awareness about what's going on. So you'll see a lot of activity around, the Special Olympics programs and different AP classes, athletics teams, getting achievements.
That in
and
itself
whatnot.
is a distinction, by the way. When
Absolutely.
you mentioning things that Milford has.
Absolutely. The Best Buddies program, I mean, there's fantastic.
The Best Buddies program. Yeah, I don't cover the school committee as a reporter.
Okay.
So what I learn about the school is people ask me to go up and take a photo of something. And the more, I cover things like the annual the Best Buddies Sweetheart Dance every year. You have the Special Olympics trials right now, where everybody's coming to Milford throughout the year to do things. I mean, Jen Walsh's reputation around the state.
Absolutely.
She got a national award 2 or 3 years ago.
Well earned.
For what she did. I don't think everyone realizes all the things the school does that are
Absolutely.
positive. I think they hear some negatives and tend to focus on them.
I know they have also done some work maybe a year or 2 ago with local realtors in terms of trying to create that connection, because I think fundamentally we want to bring in families and introduce them to our community and keep them in our school system. And so the more we can establish that
And
connection.
realtors often are the ones who give the first glance at the town.
Absolutely. And the more they know, the better, right? If they've
Especially if somebody's moving to this area, they have children, they'll ask the realtor, especially if their company sort of hands them off to a realtor, or they just come in and they pick a realtor, it's tell us about the school system. I mean, parents care more about the school system of young children, more about the school system than how close it is to work.
Sure.
You know, otherwise you wouldn't have so many people driving up 128, 495, going to Boston, going to Worcester, going to Providence, going here, there, and everywhere, living in Milford.
Absolutely. And I think if you were using a realtor that was based in a neighboring town and just referencing, you know, sort of the district's accountability rating, I think they'd be missing a lot of the picture, and that would be unfortunate.
See, I wouldn't even know to ask about that. I do know people are concerned. What would your idea be to get Milford High from a level 3 back to a level 1? I mean, obviously it'll take some time.
Yep, they put in place a couple years back a writing program called Writing with Colors, which really helped with the ELA scores. And so I think now the goal is really to increase on the math side. And so there's some math intervention work going on, identifying specific students who really just did not score well and pulling them out for specific MCAS intervention. In my understanding, that's also had a really strong showing so far. So I think programs like that, where you can kind of target some individuals that need the help, is going to be a key item.
Yeah.
Again, I don't think that students should spend 90% of their day getting ready for a test. I don't think we're serving them well if we do that, but certainly want to be giving them the skills to do well on that.
No, when I was in high school, what I remembered, at a different state, different time, what I remembered was there were tests we had to take every year, but the teacher would teach a regular curriculum, and about a week or two before that test, they might switch over and teach, what's a good way, teach for the test, the types of things that would be on the test.
Examples.
And then as soon as the test was over, you'd go back to the normal curriculum.
I mean, ideally, the test is aligned with the curriculum such that it's, you know, not independent, but absolutely understood. Yeah. And were the tests on slate too, or no? Just kidding.
No, they were on paper with the fill in the little things with your number 2 pencil.
Absolutely.
No, but I look today. I understand the Chromebook initiative 100%. I understand, learning with the computer. I understand the term screenagers with, the kids glued to it. But the fact of the matter is, it is the dominant method of communication, not just of students, but at work. I mean, how many people, how many professional white-collar people talk about coming home and have an hour of email every night?
Absolutely.
You probably have it.
Absolutely.
And it's a fact of life. Well, you either have a smartphone, which it's very hard to read your email on, a tablet or a laptop or a desktop. And, having somebody use that for 10 years in school system, they're a leg up on the people that don't. And show me a school system not doing that, by the way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you want them to be prepared, right? You want students to be prepared when they leave. But certainly I think technology is a component and we need to use it.
It's a tool. It's not it's a method of learning. It's not the learning.
Absolutely.
However, it is teaching them to be familiar with the devices they will use when they get out. Katie, I'll tell you a joke. My kids were in the neighboring Mendon Upton system, and they had a seminar years ago when your child was leaving middle school and going to the high school, and they were going to put on a PowerPoint. Now, in Mendon Upton, it was required that a kid knew how to do an animated PowerPoint to get from 4th into 5th grade, and the principal of the high school could not get the PowerPoint that she wanted to do to work, and I yelled out, "Find a 4th grader." And people, oh, you got to, if people who know me, they know that's typical of me, but I did it. And, the principal later said to me, "Did you have to say that?" I said, "Well, if you're requiring a 4th grader to know it and you don't, there's a disconnect here."
Absolutely.
Anyway, the little beep you heard, not the audience, is we have about a minute left.
Okay.
So here's your time once again.
Absolutely.
Tell people why they should vote for you.
Certainly. Thanks, Kevin. I believe that I am a hard worker, an active listener, and an effective collaborator, and I think I would be a great addition to the team of 7 that serves the Milford Public School District and the community of Milford.
Okay. Well, as we've said to all the candidates at the end, first of all, to the audience, please go out and vote on April 3rd, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. You know where, the same polling places. To you, good luck on April 3rd, and thank you again for running.
Thanks for having me, Kevin.
Okay.